Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. So this video is going to basically be what this channel is going to consist of. I've decided that I'm going to be doing mystery type of videos, whether that be conspiracy theories, missing persons cases, unsolved murders, unsolved cases like aliens, just all that sort of crazy crap basically is what this channel is going to be now, and I'm super freaking excited about it. So when it comes to the case I'm about to talk about, it is a missing persons case, and I kind of wanted to put in a little disclaimer before I started. I have nothing but positive intentions when I do videos like this. When I put up content, I want it to be helpful to someone or positive in some sort of way. You never know what circulating a story could potentially do for that particular case, whether someone sees it and they know something or they've seen this person before. You just never know. The best thing that you can do is to circulate it. And I know I'm not a huge channel right now, but I feel like doing something is better than nothing. Plus, I don't think you guys know, but before I started cosmetology school, I actually went to school for criminology. I was studying to be a crime scene investigator, so this is a huge passion of mine, and I'm hoping that maybe, because I am really passionate, interested, and somewhat educated on these types of cases, that maybe I can bring a new theory into play or just anything like that. So that is my sole intention. I'm not trying to upset anyone. I am not trying to say anything negative about anybody. This is just me trying to get facts out there. So the first case I'm going to do, I actually had a really difficult time finding information on, which I find very interesting because it is a very, what I would consider, suspicious and interesting case. It involves a very large company, which is probably half the reason why I couldn't find much, but the facts just don't add up or make sense, and I will let you guys be the judge of that at the end of this video. Today I'm going to be talking about Rebecca Coriam, and she was 24 years old. She was from England. She was always described as a very bubbly, very happy, energetic, like always pushing forward, always positive person, and that's a very, very important thing to keep in mind during this entire case. So she actually had worked on a Disney cruise ship for a couple of months before her disappearance. Basically, when you work on a cruise ship, you have a couple months on and a couple months off to vacation. It's a very, very hard job. You're constantly working every single day. It's constant entertaining, especially when you're on a Disney cruise ship. So on the 21st of March in 2011, she was in a port in LA, and they were about to depart for somewhere in Mexico, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. Everything was normal. She messaged her mom on Facebook even and said, "I love you, I will call you tomorrow." Fortunately, that call did not ever happen. So about 12 hours later, the parents noticed that she hadn't called. They tried not to be too concerned about it, but they did say it was very strange for her. She was very close to her parents, so they did expect her to call and were a little taken back when she didn't. So according to friends, the 21st, the night of the 21st, she was in a great mood. They went to a bar, she had fun, and the last time she was seen, I'm pretty sure by a direct person, was at 2 in the morning. So at 9 a.m. on the 22nd, her shift was supposed to start, and she didn't show up to it. When she didn't show up for her shift, it was very unlike her, so everyone began getting very worried. So they started calling her over the intercom system, trying to get in touch with her in some way. They had someone go and check her room and a bunch of common spaces on the crew deck to see if maybe she was just sick or just off somewhere and forgot what time her shift started. Fortunately, after all that searching, they still could not find Rebecca. Someone decided to look over the security footage on the ship. They had CCTV footage from all over the ship. So at 5:45 a.m., they actually found her, and she was wearing really baggy men's clothing, and she was pulling at them like she was uncomfortable, and she was on the phone with somebody and was extremely, extremely distraught. It was very, very obvious from the footage and the pictures that I found that she was extremely upset about something. Whoever she was on the phone with, they were not having a good conversation. A man actually walked up to her, asked her if she was okay. She said she was fine, brushed it off, and then walked away and just had her head in her hands like this, just like she was extremely upset. This is where things start to get a little bit shady, if you ask me. So normally when there is a chance that someone has fallen overboard, there's a specific protocol that they are supposed to follow. They're supposed to do something called a Williamson turn, where they basically turn around and go to the areas where the person was basically last seen, like that time frame. They go to the areas they were in that time frame and search for the person. There's supposed to be lookouts on every single deck. There's supposed to be people ready to jump in, retrieve the person, but they never did that. They also waited 4 hours after they discovered she had disappeared to notify the U.S. Coast Guard. They waited 5 hours to notify the Mexican Navy, which is the area that they were in, and they waited almost 7 hours to notify the area that had jurisdiction, which happened to be the Bahamas. The Bahamian police actually had jurisdiction because that is where the boat was registered. So they waited between 4 to 7 hours to even notify anyone that she had gone missing, and they didn't even bother to turn around and see if she had fallen over. All of the searches that were conducted to find her came up with absolutely nothing. So the parents ended up getting a call, and they obviously were immediately frantic. Their daughter couldn't be found. No one really told them what they thought had happened to her or any ideas they had. Disney just offered to fly them out to LA. From my knowledge, and once again, this is something I'm not 100% sure of, Disney continued on its cruise and then just went back to LA's port on the day it was supposed to arrive back. Literally didn't even turn around to try to figure out what had happened. They seemed to be more concerned with continuing things as usual instead of figuring out where the heck Rebecca was, which is really bizarre to me. Parents said that it was very, very strange the way Disney treated the situation. They were flown in to LA. When they got there, they were put in a blacked out vehicle, driven to the cruise ship, waited for all the guests to leave the cruise ship, and then they were escorted in through a back entrance and put in a room where there was a CCTV broadcast going on where it was stating essentially that Rebecca was fine. So it made them very confused as to if she had been found or, you know, what exactly was happening, if they had theories that she was okay. So it was extremely confusing for them. Soon after they arrived, they were actually taken to the captain himself. And what I think is strange is they gave them each a cake, almost like a sorry, your daughter's gone. And then the captain just kind of bluntly stated to them, your daughter fell overboard. The story from the captain was that they found a pair of flip-flops on the 5th deck at the crew pool. So this is something that's very important to kind of keep in your mind. So these flip-flops that they found were beside the pool. She supposedly fell overboard by a rogue wave. The parents were very upset. They got her belongings, and they basically just waited to see how the investigation went. So the Bahamas, like I said, had jurisdiction over this case because that's where the boat was registered and it happened on open seas. So they sent over one detective, just one. This one detective did not do any forensic examination. He did not interview any of the guests, and he only interviewed very few of the crew. And to top it all off, he only spent 1 day doing his investigation. To put that into perspective for you, the Disney Wonder is a 1,000-foot ship. It had 2,400 passengers on it, around 1,000 crew members, and had 11 separate decks. And he only spent 1 day doing his investigation. So when the Coriams were given all of Rebecca's belongings, they actually looked over the flip-flops and saw that they weren't even Rebecca's to begin with. On the very side of them, there was someone else's signature, and they were not her size, weren't her style, and her best friend even vouched for that, saying that they were not her flip-flops. Basically, the only thing that pointed to her possibly being thrown over the edge by a rogue wave was these flip-flops, and the flip-flops turned out to not even be hers. They never really got an answer, and they weren't really impressed with the way things were handled, so they decided to hire their own private investigators. Now, these two private investigators are literally still working on this case. They immediately knew something was wrong. If you look at the crew pool where she claimed to have been thrown over, it is at the very front of the ship. First of all, a wave would have to be over 100 feet for it to even go over. It would have created some sort of damage to the ship, and what I cannot wrap my head around is how they think that she would be thrown over, but the flip-flops don't go anywhere. They stayed there. That doesn't make sense to me. 2 months after she went missing, the parents actually were contacted by a bank.
That new clue in the search for the young cruise worker turns out to be recent activity on her credit card. It's one of the few hopeful signs the family's received since she vanished in March.
Told that her card had actually had some activity on it. They couldn't find out what happened with it. This really led to nothing other than giving them really high hopes that she was still out there somewhere. Another strange thing that happened is they figured out even later after that her Facebook password had been changed, and that means someone who had to have known her password originally went on and changed it. So in November 2011, a journalist called John Ronson actually reached out to the family and said that he had booked himself a cruise and wanted to go and figure out what happened for himself. He went and asked the crew all kinds of questions and got a very strange response from one man when he asked if they knew anything about Rebecca. The man replied to him with, "I don't know anything about it. It didn't happen. You know that's the answer I have to give you." That to me just shows that something is absolutely not right when someone immediately gives that sort of reaction. Most of the crew though just said, "We're really sad about it. We were really close with her. She was very sweet." But some described that she had an underlying sadness. He went to every single deck to see where there could be a possible area for her to have fallen off the ship, and he came to the conclusion after searching every single deck that deck 4 actually was the only place that he thinks someone realistically could have fallen over. It was a track, I'm pretty sure, and since she was very athletic, it would be no surprise if after she was upset she wanted to clear her head, take a jog, and he saw a man standing there that was standing the railing and asked him, "So this is where she fell over?" And the man replied with, "No, she fell over on deck 5. I know because I was here." He instructed him to go to the 10th floor and look over the front of the ship. When he did this, he immediately knew there was no way possible she could have fallen over. There was a huge steel wall that was above head height, had to have been at least 6 feet tall. So there is just no way that she could have been pulled over a wall like that by a rogue wave. He was also actually confronted by someone else, and this person claimed to say that Disney knew exactly what happened to her, that Disney records everything, so Disney had to have had her phone call prior to her disappearance recorded, taped somewhere. Disney totally denied this, didn't want anything to do with it, acted as if they had absolutely nothing else. The last person that he talked to was actually one of her best friends on the ship, and she said that she would not be surprised if Rebecca actually had been on the phone with the person she was in a relationship with. Apparently their relationship was very, very back and forth. It was either really bad or really good. It was a very intense relationship, as she described it. She had her own theory that maybe Rebecca went to deck 5 because it was one of her favorite places. She went to sit on the edge of the ship to kind of free her head and accidentally fell over. However, she didn't believe that there was any way that she could have been washed over by this rogue wave, as Disney claimed. A lot of the crew members did say it was very strange that no one seemed to have seen her that day. There are guards pretty much everywhere. The location where she was at was also where they took care of a lot of passport information, really important ship information, people checking IDs to make sure the right people were in the crew area, and yet somehow no one saw where she was. Disney apparently put flowers over by the wall where they claimed she fell over, but they never said anything to the crew, never acknowledged why the flowers were there or what had happened. They totally put that down there to get everyone to see, "Oh, we're sorry," and then moved on from it. The private investigators and the Bahamian police also ruled out any sort of suicide just because they found Disneyland Paris tickets on her side table in her room where she was staying in her cabin. She had just bought them. She was planning on surprising her mom, dad, and sister when she got back. So she was planning for the future. So that indicated pretty much that she wouldn't have tried to commit suicide. Disney and the Bahamian police were really reluctant to release any sort of information. The Bahamian police did eventually release the information to England police where she lived, but the England police would not release the information to the parents, which they thought was very strange because it was their daughter. Disney was also really reluctant to work with the private investigators. The private investigators asked for the footage, all CCTV footage from the day that she went missing and that time frame, and it turns out the parents were actually shown a very cropped version of the original video. So in the actual footage of the last time she was seen, she was on deck 1. So she wasn't even on deck 5 where they claim that she went overboard. The reason why this is an issue is because there is no footage of her going up any elevator or stairs to get up to deck 5. So if she didn't go up any stairs or elevator, she never left deck 1. So how could she have fallen over the deck on deck 5? Later on, it was actually a theory, and it is still a theory, and they are trying to prove it to this day still. I literally just found an article on this the other day. They're saying there's a high possibility of a sexual assault. So on deck 1 is actually a medical center, and a lot of people believe that's where she was heading. She was wearing clothing that wasn't hers, very baggy men's clothing that looks like she just threw on. She was very uncomfortable, tugging at her clothes. She was very distraught on the phone. They still aren't sure of who she was talking to on the phone. And apparently her parents had 2 close friends stop by right after her disappearance that said that she voiced concerns of potentially falling victim of a sexual assault. Also, in the bag of belongings that were given to her parents, her favorite pair of shorts were extremely ripped up and torn apart, which could indicate a struggle. The parents decided to sue Disney because they failed in their duty of care. They also waited 4 to 7 hours to even report that Rebecca had gone missing. Disney totally dismissed this, said that they had absolutely no grounds, and in 2015 they actually ended up settling outside of court. However, even though they settled, the investigation still is continuing. Private investigators actually say they have 2 suspects in a case of a possible sexual assault. She was never found on the ship. There is no footage somehow of her jumping over anywhere, despite the area being really, really heavily recorded. So my theory is that it is very likely someone on that ship sexually assaulted her. She was always fun. She went out to the bar the night before. She probably had been drinking. Everyone probably was drinking with her. I mean, it was the first night of the cruise. Everyone's trying to have a good time. You know, it is highly likely to me, especially if she went to 2 friends before and voiced concerns of that happening. Clearly, someone was doing something to her that made her feel that way to begin with. And if it actually happened, you know, maybe Disney was trying to cover it up. I mean, imagine what would happen if one of their crew members was sexually assaulting other crew members and that crew member ended up committing suicide because of it or ended up being killed in the process of it. That would look absolutely terrible on Disney. Obviously, being such a big company, I would not put it past them to try to cover up something like that. This whole entire process was very, very strange because Disney really didn't want anything to do with it. Kind of said their own little bits and pieces about it, and then they just kind of kept out of it, which I think is very strange considering it happened on their ship, amongst their crew members, all their security. So why would they not have tried to be a more active part in finding her unless they had something to hide? And then you have to think back to that one Disney crew member who said that Disney knew what happened. And I know there's a bunch of crazies out there who could say stuff like that, but there was just too many odd responses. People saying they knew nothing and it didn't happen. And then people saying Disney knew what happened. People saying everything was recorded, yet somehow all of her footage after seeing her last is magically gone. No one saw her go overboard. No one heard her go overboard, yet the area she was in is supposedly very highly managed by crew members. Something to me just seems very, very off here. There are so many possibilities of what could have happened to her. She could have been sexually assaulted and been extremely distraught over it. She could have been trying to go to the medical center. She maybe reported it to the medical center and the medical center informed someone up higher and then she was tossed overboard. Everyone says that there was no way she could have committed suicide, but imagine if you had to be stuck on a ship for months with someone who had sexually assaulted you. What if you were scared they were going to do it? What if this person threatened her? She could have been horrified into committing suicide. She could have jumped over the edge herself. I don't know if there was any way that on the first deck she could have jumped overboard, but there is not a single bit of evidence showing her go off of the first deck. No elevators caught footage of her going up and no stairs, so she didn't leave that deck. I am hoping that the private investigators find something because this whole entire case is just screaming foul play to me. Nothing makes sense. You know, things were kind of made up. Timing was off. No one tried to find her at first. That's just not the proper way to handle a situation. The parents actually have a page up for her where they update on new information. They have a whole bunch of different video clips and things that you can read up about it, so I'm going to link that down below. They are still looking for her. They are still trying to figure out what happened for her, and I don't blame them. There is no closure in that. Nothing about that makes sense. Nothing about that would ease my mind as a parent, so I don't blame them for pushing on about this. If you guys have any theories or anything about it, let me know down below, because to me, something like that doesn't just happen. A freak wave doesn't just pull someone overboard and no one notices the freak wave totally overtake the front of the ship. Like, I just don't get how that was a logical answer. Anyways, guys, if you have any suggestions of people you want me to do next, or any other mysteries, unsolved murders, conspiracy theories, let me know and I'll do that for my next video. But thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!